Welcome to the Soul Body Wholeness Podcast.
Each episode is a living, breathing transmission. Together, we will explore deep, nuanced, and controversial topics of the soul. Welcome to your community of sensitive seekers and deep feelers.
Welcome back, Goldsbrand.
All right. Welcome to the show, dear listeners. Today I have a very special guest. I always say that, but that's because it's true. Every one of the guests I find super special and unique and powerful. And today is definitely no exception to that rule. Today we have the great and powerful Chris Marhefka, who is a master coach, a worldwide retreat facilitator, and co-founder of the men's movement, 13 Pines. And obviously, we're going to allow his essence to transmit throughout the show. I'm not going to introduce too much more than that, except that I met Chris at a canyoneering outdoor trip for men in Sedona, Arizona, and it was truly life-changing. And I felt such a frequency of heart-based leadership and grounded masculinity from Chris that I find extremely rare and precious. And I'm so excited to just be connected with him and be connecting with him here. So without further ado, welcome to the Soul Body Wholeness Podcast, Chris Marhefka.
Thank you so much, brother, and deeply honored I received that. Thank you.
Yeah. So today's conversation, we were sort of breaking this down beforehand, and what seems really alive for Chris, and it's definitely alive for me right now as well, is this theme of returning to what's important in one's life. You know, coming back to the fundamentals, coming back to the foundations. And often when we do that on an individual level, what we find is it is really this collective coming back, right? It's like, where are we as a society? Where are we as a culture? What are we prioritizing? What are we saying is important? What are we saying we want to protect? And that journey really starts with oneself. So I'm super excited to explore this topic and also explore it from the narrative of the story arc of, you know, where Chris was before he found this. Chris is at a place in his life where he's really living his values. He's really living in accordance and in alignment with his values. And I'm very excited to hopefully sort of unlock some of the codes of how you got there, Chris, because I'm sure your story is like so many of ours. It didn't just start with the connection and the ancient and the holy and the sacred, right? It started from maybe a lot of the opposite of those values. So I'm very excited to dive in, but before we do, it's tradition that I call us all into presence for a moment. So wherever you find yourself, if you are not multitasking or driving, I invite you to close your eyes in this moment and actually begin to breathe into your roots, into your pelvis. And with each breath, imagine that you have roots rooting down from your pelvis, through your legs, through your feet, and connecting to the earth. And allow those roots to go deep, 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 all the way into the center of the earth. And feeling the shared resonance of your root chakra with the root chakra of the earth. That felt sense of safety, belonging, abundance, gratitude, just really belonging in this moment, in this body. In just one breath together, inhaling and letting it out. All right. Very good. I'm excited about this, Chris.
Mm, me too. And thank you for that. I love that you do that. Done a lot of podcasting. I don't know how many drop-ins I've done before we kick it off. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm really trying to do things differently than I've been experiencing podcasts.
Mm, rock on, man. It's
Rock
leadership.
on. Yeah. So, Chris, do you have I'm gonna leave it open for you,
Yeah.
like how you want to share. Yeah.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. I'll kick it off just by sharing how prevalent this conversation is in my life, because I certainly wasn't always living a life of connection to myself, to others, and definitely wasn't connected to my own values. I I I teach this a lot in my work, but I see a huge lack of values, concrete values that people hold in their lives. You can call them principles, core values, just what's truly meaningful and important in one's life seems to be lacking for so many people. And one of the biggest challenges that most people speak to me about, and I think in general the collective is facing, is that there's like a lack of meaning. There's a lack of depth. There's a lack of like knowing, like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? And when we're missing that, when there's no tether to that, there's infinite possibilities of ways our attention can get distracted from us, and it can pull us in all sorts of different directions, which aren't necessarily best for us. They're not suited for us, and they're also not best for the collective. And I see that as not inherently good or bad. It's neutral. There's just distractions in life. And it's our own individual responsibility to rediscover and reconnect with that which is truly important to oneself, our values. And as I was raised, I didn't really feel anything deeper than just the cultural programming of, you just listen to your parents, you do what they say, you follow the rules, you do the good school, good job, retire when you're 65 route. That just like this very like surface level roadmap of life. And in that was religion, in that was like ancestry. And I think that so many of the things that have had like value and richness in our life have been largely lost, and they've been traded for things that are oftentimes lacking in substance or depth. And some of the things I'm like referring to here is trading like a deeper spiritual connection. For some people, it comes through religion or other modalities and practices, but some like deeper connection to source, to God. And that's been traded for like a very surface level or a materialistic pursuit. And that was my life for really my whole life. I was raised religious, but I didn't believe any of it. Like, it didn't feel rooted in anything like true to me. It just felt like a set of rules and guidelines that if you don't follow, you get punished. And so I did consider myself atheist or agnostic for the better part of 33 years. And it was right around 3, ironically, the year of Christ,
Mhm.
that I started to have what I would refer to as an awakening, a spiritual awakening, and an awakening of meaning in my life. And you're absolutely right. Like you said in the intro, it didn't just happen. There wasn't a switch that just flipped for me. It was an unwinding of all these years of doing what I thought was right, what I thought was good, what the good boy, the nice guy would do. and just essentially following someone else's path to finding a deeper connection to myself and to something greater, and then starting to peel away the things that weren't that, and ultimately find where I sit today, which is very clear on what's important to me, very clear on what I value, very clear on how I spend my time, who I spend it with, where I live, very intentional about the way I've curated my life. And that's how it feels. It feels like curation
Mm-hmm.
of an infinite palette. And I think all of us have a unique art piece that we're painting with our life, or we get to. And some people forget that, and they start painting someone else's artwork. And yeah, I was call it grateful enough to discover that young enough at 33. And I say grateful somewhat jokingly, because it was the most painful process ever to like really face all the ways where I was out of alignment with this deeper knowing now. And back then, it was all materialistic back then. It was all just a pursuit of, it wasn't even necessarily money, but what I thought money would give me is just like this acknowledgement, this uh, prestige in some way, this like external validation. And so everything I was doing was in some way connected to that. And the thing about it, which I think so many people will resonate with, is that I felt in some ways like I was doing a good job, like I was doing my best, like I really did, until I had a greater or deeper awareness that there was something else. And it wasn't necessarily like my path was wrong up to that point. It's actually exactly what I needed. And so I really do my best not to judge any of my own past decisions and decisions of others. It's just part of the journey that I needed to have to get to where I said enough was enough.
Yeah, beautiful. So this really outsourcing our meaning, because we don't necessarily feel a deep meaning or a depth, and that's often from not knowing who we truly are deep down. And it's interesting, even on my spiritual journey, I can remember putting so much energy and intention and care and frustration and longing into relationships, um, into like having a shared house vision and making sure all the dishes were done a certain way. There were so many little things like, this person should drive differently, like outsourcing things to really care about without knowing the depths of what I'm here to actually care about. Right. Like, so it happens on all levels, I think, of one's journey. I think it's so natural. It's what we're supposed to be doing. There's the whole side of the spectrum of people full on in the matrix mainstream and, don't have any practices of cultivation and awareness and nature connection and spirituality, right? That are completely possibly severed from knowing themselves and therefore knowing what's important and what's worth protecting. So they replace it with really not so good stuff. And then there's the whole other side of the spectrum where you can be still pretty far along in your path. And to me, it necessitates underworld work in spirituality, not upper world work. Upper world work's a very important aspect of spirituality. And so is middle world work and working on your relationships and your inner child healing. But there's a whole dimension of underworld journeying, which is coming into your deepest sense of self as an identity, as a fractal of God consciousness. And it contains within it the information of what you're here to do. And once you locate that, it's not that you have to think about caring about it or prioritizing it. You're instantly like, I will kill for this. I will protect this. This is very important. It becomes very clear what's important. And that requires a constant excavating, as you were saying, the unwinding is the word you use, which is a great word, of the myriad of shit that we have taken on, that we have conditioned from our family, from our culture, from our ancestry, from our past lives, parallel lives, whatever you believe. There's so many dimensions of the not self. And it, like you said, is a really important part of the journey to experience all of those. And then sometimes in their strong polarities of really what's not you, because you learn at such a depth of what is not you. And this really ties into that sovereignty piece, because you really have to understand who you are deeply at this energetic level. And it requires this massive unwinding and coming into your frequency time and time again. And yeah, I feel really curious about your unwinding process. I think that would be supportive for people to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So much wisdom you shared in there. And I love how you reference like the external versus the internal. And I think that's such a great frame for this conversation. And I can share about like where it was lacking for me, but really everywhere. But I think just in the cultural development of humans, our children, there's a huge emphasis on external locus of control. And there was actually a beautiful book, even before I was in like my spiritual awakening, I started to shift into more personal development. There's a book called, I think it was Mindset. And I don't remember the author. I think it was Carol something, but it talks about this difference between an external locus of control and an internal locus of control, specifically related to like children and how they were raised. And those with internal locus of control, they had better outcomes across the board. They had happier lives, all these things, like every metric you could think of, because it always came back to this like taking internal responsibility, reconnecting to self, like who am I? And the external is always looking for someone or something to tell them what to do or to guide them in some way. And there's so many examples of that in our culture. They're infinite. The broader ones are that we ship our children off to learn from other people. Schools, a lot of religions have external locus of control. It's all outside of us. And there's still a lot of modalities that focus on the internal, but they're not as common, especially not in how I was raised in the United States. And so there's always this like look outside of yourself. And for me, it started to shift, like the early stages of this started to shift when I started reconnecting with nature. And I say reconnecting because as a child, I remember being very connected. I would run through the forest, I'd play in the dirt. I was like building tree houses and all these things. And it was almost when this mysterious point of like, okay, you're an adult, so you have to do serious things now hit, I disconnected from that part of me. And that was, I definitely wouldn't have said it then, but as I started reconnecting with it, it was like the first like spiritual experiences that I was starting to have was when I was just out alone in nature. And it didn't even have to be long. Like I could go out on a walk. I had a woods behind my house, and I would just go out and I would walk, and I was into trail running back then, and I'd go out on a run and just like completely lose all of the day-to-day frustrations and struggles and worries and thought patterns. They would just dissolve and fall away. And in that space, as they would fall away, there was just something richer. It was like I would see clear, colors would be brighter, and there was a few qualities that I think anyone can use in this reconnection process. It was almost always solo. There was no distraction of like talking with other people. It was almost always in nature for me. But what nature did for me is it slowed down everything. Nature has a pace and a cadence that's significantly slower than the artificial. And so it just slowed everything down. So slowness was one. Um, Alone was another one. And really no distractions. I didn't listen to music. I didn't listen to a podcast, or when I was doing this, I didn't seek to distract myself. And when I had those things removed, I noticed that my breath would just start to slow, and then I would notice it more. And then I would notice myself, like my gaze would widen and soften, and all of these things that like now we do consciously in practice. But back then it was just happening organically because I was allowing myself to be rid of the things that was in the way of that happening. And it's, for me, even today, like in practice, it's obvious. It's a lot easier to practice in a quiet and a still place and energy than it is at a rock concert or like a techno festival. It's not impossible, but our environment plays an enormous role. And I realized, like, as I was starting to see that contrast in my life, I was noticing how much of my life was fast, like everything from one
Mm-hmm.
thing to the next. I was talking fast. I was walking fast. It's just like everything was, I was driving fast, eating fast.
Me
Oh,
too.
and yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so once I started to see that contrast, I started, even before I knew what I was doing, even before I had like a really clear practice, I would, it was like an intention to bring some of that energy into my life. And so I would do things. I'd be like, okay, walk a little slower from the front door to my office or to my bed. I was like, okay, talk a little slower, breathe a little deeper. And so I would start bringing these intentions in before I even had like a teacher telling me to do it. It was just like, it was happening. And I took this like internal locus of control because I noticed how good I felt in that setting, in that environment, this like connected and deep and meaningful. So much better. My body felt better. My mind was clearer. I was creative. And then contrast that to the just go, go, go mode. It just felt like I was on unconscious autopilot. I was. And so the more this contrast started to appear in my life and I started creating more and more of it, it started to become painfully obvious how I couldn't straddle these two things.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Like I couldn't just
Yeah, it
be
was really
one
like
ver yeah.
amplifying that
Mhm.
contrast. It was so loud that you couldn't, and that's what I was talking about before. Is like going deep into the not self themes of life. It's very important sometimes because it amplifies the truth of what's out of resonance.
Yeah. So much. And what I didn't have back then that I have so much of now is an ease as I go into the not self. There's a relaxation that comes with it. And that's just after years and years of practice. Cause back then when I was starting an initial journey, it was like, I did not want to face it. I wanted to fight it. It was like all these things that just really like clenched down inside of me. And so the first few years of this like unwinding was really painful because there was so much fighting and battling and wrestling and with myself. And then as I learned to bring back in the gentleness and the slowness and the peace of nature and that cadence, it's like, oh, I can bring that to myself. I can bring that to this journey. So even now, when all these patterns that still arise for me in these thoughts and these not self, the shadows, they kind of bubble up. It's a lot gentler of a process than it was initially, but that only came through practice.
Yeah, I love this share because I just so deeply resonate with your story and bringing in the element of solo time in raw and wild nature, because as I believe fully, our soul is made of the elements of wild nature. It's like where the soul lives. Like it's so mirrored the truth of who we are. And those lessons to be initiated by nature. It's not a physical teacher, human. It's not a book. It's your own direct experience of God, of soul, of your truth, right? And the time piece, I think, is so massive for so many of us. And that was definitely my journey, my story. As I was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years in my spiritual path, when I look back, I was still rushing through life with this underlying dysregulation, this underlying anxiety that was fueling everything and also draining my life force. And I think I want people listening to realize just the levels of indoctrination of making that normal and to not feel guilty. And that, as you shared, Chris, it's a process of unwinding. It'll be a spiral. It'll be cyclical, going back. But I truly, like you, feel that I'm massively on the other side of that. My life does not include a lot of rushing. My mornings are very spacious, and it feels like this huge act of rebellion, right? Like, and there's this quote as you were speaking that I remembered that, nature doesn't rush and somehow everything gets accomplished. And we've forgotten that. We're living in this illusion that we have so much to do, and the only way to solve all our problems, get all of our stuff done, is to go faster and to do more. And it feels really intense and scary for our sense of safety to just slow down and get out of the mind, even though the mind is what's creating all of that anxiety. It's being in that mental processor instead of like, oh, when I'm in nature, I notice the dust settles, I start to feel into my body, and life starts aligning. My environment, as you spoke to the environment, it's not something I have to keep mentally figuring out what's going to be my best environment. It starts to show itself as you clean up your inner environment and slow the fuck down.
Yeah, yeah, because it's everywhere around us. It really is. And
Everywhere.
there's plenty of examples of that. Like you can see it in people and like friends. Like there's some friends that you just feel better around and pay attention to like what they do and how they move and how they breathe.
You're
Children
one of
are,
those people for me, for sure. I'm just like,
thank you.
I don't know what it is, but the field feels so grounded and calm right now. I don't know what
Yeah.
it is.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Yeah, I get that reflection a lot, and it's always deeply humbling. I obviously acknowledge it, and it's something I've practiced, and maybe is some inherent in my design, but it's what I'm committed to. It's what I'm committed to for myself first and foremost, and then everyone that I touch from there, like in concentric circles, like my family first and foremost, and then my friends and my clients and all these concentric circles is like, I know the power that it had for me because there was a time when I wasn't that. I was kind of like in this season that I was talking about of my late 20s, early 30s. I was highly caffeinated. I was in every sense of the word. And I was, and not just caffeine as a substance, but just my frequency was that
You were
anxious
caffeine.
I was caffeine, like embodied
Yeah, yeah.
caffeine is what I was. And I was
Mm-hmm.
also mainlining it, taking caffeine pills and all this just to keep going harder. And so for me, I got the embodied lesson of how good that feels. And so first and foremost, I do it for myself and for my health and for my well-being and my connection to God. but also as a gift, just as a gift to the collective of like, I know what's possible when we're in that environment, when we're in that field. It's healing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely healing.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I shared with you at, you know, the men's retreat, is that, you had shared that a lot of gratitude for just the ease of everything and how everyone just kind of, contributed, and there was just so much smoothness to everything. And I was like, Chris, that's you. It's not because you're bossing everyone around and telling them to do that. Your inherent resonance is harmonizing. And that's from, your natural inherent frequency, but also you coming into contact with that and cultivating that. Like that's real. That's really real. People have an essence, and it has an effect on the collective field that the person is in. I have my own that's very reflectory, and it typically amplifies what's there. There's a lot about, I understand about my presence and its impact on a collective space. But that was what was so beautiful, is like hearing your share and just like, that's just you doing it without doing it. That's you being, and that's allowing the doing to just naturally take place.
Thank you, brother. Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to share some reflections of your reflective nature, because on that trip, the way that you quietly observe, and then when you do speak and you add something to the space, when you bring it in, every single time, for me at least, and I can speak with how I read the room, it was like exactly what everyone was feeling, is like you encompassed and brought forward, and what was the word you use? Exaggerated, or like
Amplified.
amplified. Yeah, it amplified the feeling that was there, and the energy that was there. And so,
Mm,
yeah, it's a beautiful gift.
thank you. Yeah, 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 yeah. And I feel that about myself. And, once we feel our core essence and our power, man, what a sense of belonging that it provides, without this needing to figure out the external environment and people to be a certain way and to love me, please accept me. Using that as the barometer for a sense of belonging is literally the game of suffering, right? And you actually feel your inherent essence. You understand that it has an individual piece that the entire universe is incomplete without. And once you actually feel that at an embodied level, it nourishes that sense of belonging in a way that all of those old strategies never could.
Hmm. Yeah, and speaking to that sense of belonging, I want to just, we just did it very naturally, and this wasn't an intention, but the way that we both shared about each other right there was from a place of grounded truth. It was secure, and it was honest and heartfelt. And so many people are missing that level of connection, of just being able to really praise and love fully and freely, because there's internal turmoil that leads us to then externally project, externally judge, measure ourselves against other. And that's the thing that's getting in the way of authentic connection with others, is all of these internal things that we're just then putting on other people. That's the barrier between people. But when you, like you said, when you connect to that essence, when you embrace it, when you really touch and start to amplify your own unique gifts, you see the value in it, and you see from that place, you're no longer trying to be someone else. So then you can recognize other people's gifts, like, wow, that's unique. Like, wow, that's beautiful how they do it. Oh my, like that's such a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
Yeah, it totally obliterates the competition thing, because you and I are like couldn't be in competition, because we both have our own soul essence that is so complementary and contributory to a field. Like it's like we're both needed, and there's nothing to compete, right? Like that is the soul blueprint right there. And we are, as a culture, far from that so often. The competition, especially with men, it's so ingrained. And you talk about the unwinding process. Like, I lived in spiritual community for 6 years before doing this unwinding, and experienced, polyamorous ways of being and going into dance spaces with partners. And, just it wasn't just like unwind. It was like ripping, tearing, gripping. Things are like, no, I don't want to unwind. I must protect the trauma. And like, such an intense time, right? Like, those programs for scarcity and competition run so deep.
Mm-hmm. And and don't get us wrong, listeners, that competition and ego exists in the quote unquote spiritual space quite a bit. In fact, maybe
Totally.
more in some ways.
I think
Like,
it
who can be
does.
more spiritual? Yeah.
Who has the least amount of ego? I think I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I've
true.
definitely had the biggest ego death here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that phase, like, it stirred up so much for me. And I realized at some point this isn't healthy, and I actually needed space and to leave a lot of those communities. So a lot of what had gotten stirred up could actually settle and integrate, and I could, separate what is actually mine and my work to do without all of these competing energies for my attention in pretty
Mm-hmm.
much my like psychosomatic energy field, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%, man. And that's in the kind of like the healing journey, the healing space, the way I talk about it. There's many terms we could say for it, but it's like both the masculine and the feminine that's required in this healing process. And to really simplify it, is like the feminine is in collective, like you're healing in collective, you're healing in spaces, you're healing in experience, you're healing in releases, and the masculine is just nothingness and stillness and silence. And so you really have to find the cadence and the timing that's most appropriate for you in your journey. And sometimes it's the opposite of what you're in. It's like you're so far on one end of the spectrum and you're just comfortable there, but exactly like you need the exact opposite of that. And then over time, obviously it's about integrating both, and again, feeling your essence and where you feel most alive. But in the process, yeah, there's a shadow in both. There's a shadow in both the complete nothingness, aloneness, and going that route. And there's a shadow in the togetherness as well. Uh, and and I think that's just an individual question for oneself, is like where you feel you are and what you need and what your medicine is in this point.
Yeah, I mean, that circles back to the locus of control and slowing down and being with oneself. And that was such a massive topic. I was literally just journaling about this exact thing this morning, believe it or not. um, just how I want to be a leader and a healer and a teacher is with the full on quality and essence of one who creates containers for a person to go deep into themselves. And I want them to consistently drop any concepts that are getting created from the words that I'm using. I don't want any
Yeah.
part of my wisdom to be a defined path in the external to look at, to have form. I want it to invite in the path of feeling, the path inwards, and to keep being guided by that. And I'm here to sort of reflect, is like, you might actually be going outwards, and like if anything, I'm doing the opposite of the guru complex. Like, that's my, it's like, you might be listening to my words too much. Like, don't get caught here, go back inside. And, to me, that is the foundation of healing, health, sovereignty, liberation, awakening, individuation. It's finding out your fractal of truth moment to moment and realizing when you're outsourcing in any way and coming back.
Yeah. So well said, man. The uh, like words are so important and so powerful. They put form and structure to energy, but
Hmm.
they're still limiting. And
Hmm.
teachers are powerful and important. They bring form and embodiment to teachings and lessons, and yet they're limiting. And so understanding when they have value and when they're actually limiting you is so important on the journey. Ultimately, we don't need any of the teachers. We don't need any of the words and the teachings and the structure that's been built, but it helps form a container for people at a certain stage to go into so that they can go out of, or so that they can expand out of, is a better way to put it. And it's always both and never losing the connection to your own truth in the process, because that is the shadow of the external and of the words and the structures and the teachings. I mean, I know I've been in this space, you have a long time as well. How many people we know that say the right things and they use the right language and they have all the
Hmm.
terms, but they're so far from embodying the teachings.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
because they've just defaulted to the form and the structure, and they haven't actually squeezed it and allowed it to percolate through themselves and their body and their soul, and and transmit it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that that's been happening for a while. And a part of this is like a theory that I work on with my people, is like a part of the role of AI is to really amplify the people who are doing that, because AI is great at that. It can use all the pretty languaging. And for those of us who've gone deep into like trying to use AI and see what it looks, I can spot it everywhere and it's instant cringe. And I spot when someone's being authentic, and I zone in and I'm like, oh, they're not using AI. I actually want to receive this person.
Mhm.
And so I believe that this big divide is happening, and those who are not going to be using it to, outsource their creativity and, their embodied knowing, like what are you actually embodied in and that you can share on? Or are you just regurgitating? It may have been harder to spot those people before. It's getting easier, and it's about to get real easy and real weird
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what I think.
I love weird, man. Yeah, it's so true. It's like this thread. AI is just an extension of this thread that we've been on with humanity in a long time, and it's this uh choice, this path, this fork in the road, or maybe a spectrum is a better word, of where
Hmm.
we're living between natural and artificial, between real and fake. And I say this all the time. Every single piece of technology is a poor recreation, a cheap Chinese knockoff of the
Mm,
real thing that already exists within us and within nature and within God and within
yep.
this beautiful, whatever we want to call it, life we're in. We already have all of those abilities. They've just been suppressed so much, and we have given them up for this external tools, all these external technologies. And in one ways it feels easier, it feels um more convenient, but when you reconnect to the real power, the thing that it's trying to create, the skill or the experience that technology is trying to recreate, the real thing is way juicier, it's way better, like infinitely better. And AI just goes further into the mechanical thinking mind where so many people are stuck, and so far further and further away from the heart soul connection.
Yeah, it's just more band-aid solutions birthed from the mindset of the problem that created the whole thing. Like we're in such a complex web of issues, that I think deeply, deeply stem from this disconnection thing.
Yeah.
We're severed at the crown, we're severed at the roots, and
Mhm.
we're suspended in this false matrix of whatever we're doing. And to me, I've felt like this for a long time. It needs such a fundamental breakdown. It needs like a full on getting down to the roots, fixing the root system, and then letting it grow,
Mm-hmm.
which we don't need to go into the rabbit hole of this, but what I feel of what's happening with that, as I said, is just this reclamation of the feminine, this
Mm-hmm.
remembering, this reverence that the feminine is actually the foundation, not just something that we have forgotten and that would be supportive along with the masculine. It's literally the foundation. So we've cut off our foundation, right? And so I believe that's what's happening right now as a collective. That's why there's so much chaos and all the systems are collapsing and all the things, right? It's like the foundation needs a lot of help. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's starts with this reclamation of the feminine.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. The 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 way that it, I don't know, occurs to me is that we are the bridge between this material plane, this earth, this existence, and the heavens above. And and with losing connection to one of those, you get, or both, you get suspended in this false space. And
Mm-hmm.
this is probably a good time to say that, as we're kind of like, we've spent a lot of like talking about like what's happening and what's wrong and what's it. I am so uh, I don't I don't know if, again, it's my design. I'm so optimistic. I actually wasn't. So I wasn't at one point. I was in a very dark place for a few years. A- And I'm very optimistic because I believe if one has a soul, that connection can never actually be severed. And we can choose to get so far from it that it's unrecognizable. It's it's like when you're walking in the woods. I've done a lot of backpacking and hiking, and you're walking on a trail and you kind of like know where your next camp spot is. The further you get off trail, like if you want to go explore an adventure, the harder it is to find your way back. You quickly get lost out in the woods. And so if you don't have little breadcrumbs back to that trail, the path, you get lost. And it's not that the trail disappeared for you, it's just that you chose to go so far away from it that you are having a really tough time finding your way back.
That's definitely a metaphor for sure. And I would love to, yeah, continue with the story because maybe this threads into that a little bit, like, so on one hand, you've got this raw and wild nature connection, which has helped you understand some of your values around time. It's helped you rewire what you've been running on, Mr. Caffeine, and just slowing down and realizing, oh, this is actually a value of mine. This is important to me, is slowness and patience and just an essence of not rushing and stillness. So I'm curious that as you went on your journey, what were some of the other unwinding moments?
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. What was coming, man, I don't know why this is just how things work, but what was coming to me in talking about is I had a journey as like an athlete. So at a time in my life when it felt like I didn't have control of anything and life was just happening to me. I question. I was like, what's the thing? Like, what's a thing that I need right now? Like, and for me, there was this sense of doing something that I think is impossible would like help me reclaim my power back. And I remember sitting at my office chair. I owned a gym at the time, and things weren't going well. It was like my first foray into entrepreneurship, and it felt like life was chaos. And I remember sitting there and just out of nowhere, I had this flash of a memory. And this memory was back in high school. I was sitting behind my best friend Kyle, and he was wearing this white t-shirt, and on the back was a map of Kona, Hawaii. And it was a t-shirt from the Ironman World Championships. And I have this picture just like in stone in my vision. And it said like swim 2.4 miles, bike 112, and run a marathon 26.2. And ironically, I think it said, suffer now, live the rest of your life as an Ironman. Ironically, it said suffer, but, and I remember thinking in that moment when I was sitting in that chair, like, that's impossible. Like, no one does that. That's an impossibility. Like, physically can't do that. And at this point, now fast forward to sitting at my desk, I had maybe run a 5K or two, and I was running a gym, but I was like a gym rat. I wasn't like this guy. Um, and didn't own a bike, like didn't know how to swim across a pool without. And so just out of nowhere, Spirit was like, "You're doing this." Like it was just like, "This is what I'm doing." So I got on my computer and just Googled like how to do an Ironman, the most like noob beginner question ever. And then that led
Iron
me
Man
down.
for Dummies you
Oh, huh?
bought on your show.
That's exactly
You
what
had
it
you
was.
had the book Iron Man for Dummies.
Ironman for Dummies. And that's exactly what I need. But I followed this thread, and then every like moment led to another moment. It was There's so much to the story. It was like they usually sell out, but if you go in person, you can get a spot the next day before they open to the public. And I looked online,
Yeah.
where's the things, and I was like, oh man, there's one in Florida in like 3 weeks. And so I literally drove 6 hours to Panama City Beach and watched
Wow.
and I showed up the day before when the race was happening, and I just remember watching like these full grown men like crossing the finish line and like hugging their children and just bawling and tearing, and there was just something so deep about it. And I was like, I'm doing this. So the next day, literally just signed up and had no plan, no nothing. Hadn't read the book Iron Man for Dummies yet. And then I got back, and like the whole drive back, I was like, what am I doing? Which is what always happens when you follow the thread of intuition. There's this rubber band effect where you're like, this logically doesn't make sense. None of
Mhm.
this is rational. When am I going to have time for all this? And then like a few weeks later, I was training a bunch of youth baseball teams and stuff, and sports teams, and one of the teams was in, and somehow I was talking to one of the fathers. Ended up being a longer story, but he used to be a professional cyclist. He's done many Ironman, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I'd love to coach you. I'd love to show you. And so we kind of exchanged. I did some personal sessions for his son, and he coached me. And I remember he told me he was the first one that like told me about conscious breath, and it was through the lens of Ironman racing. So I was doing it for
Mm,
whatever reasons, but he was like teaching me about breath, and he was like, you, as long as like I'm working with you, you're not allowed to listen to music. You're not allowed to train with music. Yeah. And so everything was done in silence. And so,
that's like David Goggins style right there. He talks about that. Yeah.
and the majority of training, it's slow. It's like you're not sprinting. It's everything's slow, because it's a long race. It ended up being 11 hours for me, but it's a very slow training. And so there was so much time for myself to start thinking about how I was living my life and all these things. And through this process of the year of training and then completing it, it was it was as if through this very what seemingly surface goal thing, I reclaimed a power in myself, a truth in myself, a knowing in myself that I couldn't have gotten had I followed someone else's path of like, oh, this worked for me. This random thing entered in my awareness. It was nowhere there. And I followed it, and I tiptoed along it. And then I was eventually fully in it. my journey was a series of that. It was a bunch of things that didn't make sense when I did them or when I made the decision to do something. But there was always this like deeper knowing that the more I followed it, the louder it got.
Mm,
So in the unwinding, this is kind of what I was bringing to, is like, that was one of the first times it really happened and it played out. And it was huge on my journey. And it gave me
mm,
so much knowing in myself and belief in myself. It was like reclaiming back that external locus of control back to internal. And then along the way, um, a big part of my unwinding was letting go of the identity that I had built for 10 years. And this was around the year 33 that I was talking about before. I had built a few businesses. I was so well known in my community. I loved my reputation. I loved my community and who I was there. And I loved my clients. I loved all these things. But something in me knew that that page was ready to turn. That chapter was ready to close, and none of it made sense. Like, it didn't make sense at all. Like, it didn't make sense financially. It didn't make sense, like, from a social perspective. It didn't make sense in any way. But I just had this feeling. I was like, okay, I wasn't okay with it at first, but the more I started to walk that path of unwinding this world that I had built, it was like the first time in nature. The more I felt more alive, I felt more at home in myself. And I realized that this environment that I had created was created from a previous past self of me that was ready to shed its skin, and it was ready to see what the new version was. And I had no idea. Like, to be having this conversation, to do what I do today, was not in my field at all. It was not something I went after. It was an unwinding, and I had to
mm,
unwind all of the pieces of it, all the ways that I saw myself or that I thought others saw me. And it was just shedding and shedding and shedding. And it was a few years of a lot of shedding before I started to get clear on what I really desired, and and kind of like we're talking about, the values, that what's important to me started bubbling up more and more, but only after years of shedding. And the shedding was everything from all of my possessions. I
mm,
sold my house. I had some real estate, sold all of it, sold all the furnishings, all the things. Ended up buying an RV and traveled the country with my then wife. At the end of this year, also shedding of that relationship. At first, it was temporary. We didn't like the way that we were recreating the codependent patterns that we were both now aware of and committed to not continuing in. And so it was a temporary separation that kind of led to more space and more knowing. And it didn't make logical sense. Like, we probably had a quote unquote better relationship than a lot of people that I knew at the time. But something in me, and I believe in her as well, felt the same way, that like that wasn't it, even though like on paper it appeared to be it. It wasn't. And
mhm,
so that was one of the hardest things to really accept and let go of. And I found myself after all that unwinding, like naked and bare. And in some days feeling like I'd made a terrible mistake. Like, all these things that I shed, I was like, "No, no, no, I want them back." I was like, "Oh no, like, oh no, my warm blanket of comfort is no longer there." And I felt naked and alone and afraid in a lot of ways. But then the more and more I trusted the process, the more and more signs showed up, the more and more I believed that there was something more and deeper. So it was like, it was still, even through this process, it wasn't sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of turmoil, but just this well of trust and knowing started growing and bubbling up more and more inside of me. So I was like, okay, no, I can keep going into the darkness. I can keep going into the unknown. And I think going back to the original story that I told about the Iron Man, I was like, that was the same courage. It was just applied over many steps in my life. When I listened to the call, when I listened to that voice, that really quiet whisper, and then I had the courage to take the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step. And and so I don't think for anyone they're going to find this magic switch or this magic push button which just resolves everything. But there's always a voice. There's always something deeper. And when you start to feel it and you commit to it, there's going to be a million reasons why you shouldn't. Like infinite reasons. And it's not saying you have to burn everything to the ground, but I think there are things that we do outgrow in our life the same way we outgrow our clothes. It would be weird if I was still wearing a t-shirt from when I was 8 years old. It would be, yeah, I mean, we outgrow the way we talk. Think about if we were two teenagers doing this podcast. We outgrew that way that we talked and we interact. And so the same thing happens in our material space. We outgrow the material things that we were holding on to or was important to us at one point. It's okay for them to no longer be important. And that's a really difficult thing, especially when other people, relationships are involved. That was the hardest thing for me, was the people. Because I
Yeah.
loved every one and everything that I created. Like it had meaning, but there was just something in me that was like, but there's more that I'm meant for. And so to get to that requires a shedding of this other stuff that felt meaningful at the time and still is.
Certainly. Yeah. Everything you spoke to is such a journey of soul initiation. It is the alchemical fires that we have to walk through. It is the reclamation of our relationship with our soul and the cultivation of that trust with that relationship. And I use this term sometimes. There's a term called attachment theory, and the goal is to have secure attachment, and that happens through a buildup of capacity with trust, right? And it's like trust in yourself, trust that I'm safe, trust in the other, and just like there's this sense of regulation and security that starts to forge. And we can also have soul attachment, and that takes work and that takes listening. And so you're developing a secure attachment with your soul. And so what I hear in your story is this deep value and cultivation in listening to the whisper and heeding the call. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage because that voice is pretty much always leading us away from our current understanding, our current relationships, our current set point, our current framework of reality. And that's really scary and uncomfortable for, we call it our ego, our complex, our personality structure. But what that voice wants is for us to actually be happier in life. It wants us to be more purposeful in life. It wants us to understand what is really valuable to us. And it's guiding us to all the things that we think we need to figure out and create with our egoic minds, with our lower minds, with our personality structures, which are made up of all of the not self conditioning, right? It's like this irony is like we grip and we hold on to these old versions. And some of it is beautiful and soul based too. And it just can't go with us because it is our nature to expand and to grow. And as you said, the t-shirt example, like you don't have to get into a mental concept around this. Like you said, you don't have to burn everything. You will
Yeah.
be guided if you need to burn
Yeah.
everything. That can
Yeah.
be a thing,
Yeah.
right? But you look at a child and you don't see them go into a neurotic process when it's time to give up toys. They're not trying to replace toys with another habit. And they're like, I won't do it at night, right? Like they naturally just grow out of playing
Yeah.
with toys. And you watch a child and learn from a child, it's like they're not holding on to all of these past versions and creating, mass amounts of suffering in their life for themselves and all their loved ones by holding on to something and creating a stagnant pool. They're moving, they're evolving, they're growing. And yes, it's extremely painful. It's extremely destabilizing, especially when it comes in the form of romantic partnerships. Everything you shared in your story is my story too. I had my trials and tribulations and my experiments and my listening and my selling all my things and traveling and just letting go. And I have a psyche, at least I used to, that really held on to things like super hard and to
Mhm.
like it took me years to fully let go of a relationship, like years. And, again, the external telling us, it's healthy to be over the person within 3 months if you've been dating for a year, like whatever the stupid formulas are, right? Like, some of my relationships or my biggest initiations 3 years later, like as much as I hated it, I was like, I want to be done with this. I'm unhealthy. Like these thoughts I had when I, zoom out and look, I'm like, wow, there was so much for me to continue to burn through. It was an alchemical fire that was helping me in the moment, even 3 years after the relationship ended. What a gift. It doesn't feel like a gift in it, but
Yeah.
it's constantly guiding us into those places that we so long for and struggle in the unknown of not having those things and try to figure it out and fill the void and fill the space. But what it sounds like is that you were really mentored into this process with the triathlon of slowing down and contemplating and consistency and showing up and just doing the thing and cutting off the external noise, which is another metaphor of going into the woods without music, without any of the distractions. He's like, we're going to train without music. Like, this is for you to be with you and for you to get a mirror of where you are at moment by moment by moment. And yeah, I just love your story. And I love that you continue to cultivate that relationship with that voice. And I imagine it's just become easier and easier to trust. And it's like, it doesn't make sense to my mind. And I'm so
Yeah.
excited because this mind's about to get expanded, maybe obliterated, maybe dissolved, maybe reborn into a much more soul aligned mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah. 100%, man. And I think the more you're in, like, the more time you spend in the pocket, in the flow of life, like when magic is just unfolding everywhere around you, it gets harder and harder to ignore the how way better it is and
So
how
much better.
so much better than like the controlling way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just where I find myself, that even on the days where my like stubborn, silly ego mind wants to lock down and control, there's just this overwhelming knowing that there's a there's a flow of my life that I won't understand until after it's happened. Maybe never, maybe years after, I don't know. But I look back at things a decade ago, 2 decades ago in some cases, and I'm like, "Oh, that's why I like now I can see where it played out today." And
Mm-hmm.
that will continue to unfold. It's not done. It's just this was a step. And then a decade from now, who knows what that lesson is going to be. And the 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 flow of life is when we're in, I think I said in the pocket, that's a term that like comedians use, or like when quarterbacks are like in the pocket, like it's just a flow state. It's a flow state where how it occurs to me is that I'm like moving through the world in slow motion and almost like a wizard, like manipulating the elements
Yeah.
and just kind of like dancing through it. And almost
Yeah.
sometimes it occurs to me like I'm slipping between, like there's like a secret passageway through like this reality, and I'm just kind of like sliding through it while everyone is on both sides just doing the thing. And like like riding the perfect wave and just catching it,
Mm,
just all loss
mm,
of the small self, the ego self, just all loss of like, what do I need? What do I want? What are my fears? What are my worries? And just fully present in what this moment needs, what this moment is calling forward. And this is just how I've found and how I see the work that I now do for others, is that I can only do it from a pure place, or as pure as I am right now, because I have done all this other stuff that there's no in it for me. And of course there is. I'm gonna lie. There's like, oh, I'm good at this, and like, oh, I hope they get something out of this and all that. Like when I'm on a podcast or in sessions, there's definitely still those voices. But when I really drop into the pocket of what this moment needs, what's the next word, what's the next breath, what's the next whatever, it's always there. It's always like I don't have to. And this is one of the things I was deeply worried about, of like letting go of these tight grip of control, is because I like wanted to have all the answers, and I wanted to have it all together, and and I was afraid that I'd be a mess without it. But in fact, it's always there. Like the answer is right there. The next thing's right there. The next step is right there. Always, always.
it it's so much better and more efficient than we could ever figure out
Mm-hmm.
and try to manipulate and try to control. Because I used to be exactly the same way. Years, like, in facilitation, just like get like so worried about everyone's experience and trying to control and manipulate every single thing. Like the way you facilitated at, the retreat we're at is polar opposite of how I used to facilitate. I was so concerned about every little detail. And as I've stepped more into exactly what you were just speaking to, the heart-based, the flow-based, the trust-based, and what that requires is a deeply grounded, nourished, regulated nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
just to be. And for me, that comes from my trust in the all, in the divine, in the natural unfolding of things. And when I keep surrendering back into that, finding that perfect wave, it's like, who's doing this? Like, I feel like I'm doing things, but I'm also the version of myself who I thought was doing things is doing nothing. And he sometimes is upset about it because he's like, well, what the fuck do I do?
Uh-huh. Yeah. One
And
of my,
mostly, like, I'm in pure joy and bliss. Like, that's such a small part of my reality now. I'm just like, thank God I don't have to do anything except keep clearing myself of bullshit and control, keep surrendering, keep trusting, keep developing that soul-based, spirit-based, secure attachment, and just ask God and nature to support the space, support what I'm in, guide me to be of the highest service for all. It eliminates so much of the egoic
Mhm.
entrapment games with service and being seen and,
Mhm.
caretaking and is my cup filled up before I do the thing. It's like, I don't have to get into a mental concept around these things. I'm literally, when I'm in my flow, God is working through me. Nature's working through me, through all of us. It's all just aligning. I am of service and I'm my happiest. It's like
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
checking all the boxes,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. Yeah, that's like wrapping up the whole topic of like values and what's truly important to us. And the level of meaning that you find in service to the all, service to other, service to the collective is like the importance, like it's like the meaning that so many people are searching for, but they can't find it because they're in a service to self orientation, the what's in it for me, what's my thing, what do I get out of this. And it requires you to first make the orientation change before you get to experience the benefits of it. Like you have to, and a lot of this is like ego death and all these, like you have to be in the process of releasing and removing and being aware of these self-referencing patterns that exist within all of us, so that you can be in that place where it's just like full generous service, and like it's the best feeling in the world when you're just not even there, and it just the field is better because of it.
This is a very nuanced topic, and I'm glad you brought it up. I think these teachings really have to be metabolized with oneself, as we've talked about ad nauseum through this. So my own understanding is, so there is a self-serving attitude I could have, which is lowercase s self, which is lower mind, which is usually having to do with validation, status, control, making sure that my survival needs are met. They're not necessarily bad things. That's just what it is. It's when that is just the whole of what you're focused on. That's where suffering and illusions are born of competition and scarcity. And that's when people become violent and start war. Like all of that is birthed from that level of consciousness. And so the shadow of what looks like the light side of that level of consciousness is if you're identified still fully in that lowercase s self, lower mind, lower egoic complex, and you are taking in the conditioning that you should be more selfless and serve others, and you're only serving from that place, that also is riddled with all kinds of problems and caretaking and all kinds of unconscious like self needs and desires not getting met, and it coming out sideways through manipulation and, you know, at best, and violence at worst, right? And
Yeah.
so then there's another level of self-service, which is self with a capital S, which is service to my deep soul. And when we're more anchored in that self-service, it is interconnected with service to the all, because capital S self is soul, which is a fractal of the all. So the needs of the capital S self are in direct alignment with the needs of the all and the needs of the capital SELF self, which I consider God, you know, universe, oneness, all of it, the Tao. And so that's something that I find so interesting. People kind of just use, you know, self-serving versus selflessness. I'm like, you can still fall into some traps if you're just like swinging in these polarities of lower mind. So I just wanted to name that and see what your thoughts are on that.
Really, really well said. And that is important to mention, that it's a the lower self, the pieces, the self-serving have to be met before you are in that. Like the example you were using is like, you can't ignore those things because they will run under the surface. So the only reason and the only way you get to that point, the term I use is solid. It's one of the highest compliments I can give another person, is they're solid. And to me, that's just their physical body, their mental mastery, their emotional, their emotions, their emotional body, just their self is solid. They have good boundaries. They can go into material things, but they have done all of the layers of work required to be solid in themselves so that they don't have to live and protect it all the time. So it's like when you're like you're well trained as a martial artist, or
Mm-hmm.
you're not walking down the street worried about all these things. You're actually more relaxed because you're solid in your ability to defend yourself if needed. And that's like an example of it, but it applies to so many areas of our life where if we're not solid in something, it will be the thing that seeps up through the unconscious and plays out, and it will muddy the water of any service that you are bringing into the world. And I will say, I'm not a I don't believe that we're meant to be perfect in it. I believe we're always meant to be in the evolution and the growth of it and the moving more towards it. And so just because you're not completely solid in everything doesn't mean you can't be in service, but just being aware of where those things arise in you is going to help you when they do show up, that you don't continue to act from them and speak from them. Because when we're coming from that self-reference oriented place, it can lead to actions that are extractive actions, harming others, um, very competitive, combative energy. And that's only because it's like you're a animal backed into a corner in that moment. And becoming aware of the sense in yourself when you're like, oh, I'm an animal backed into a corner. I can't actually do what I am here to do from that place. So I take care of whatever those needs are, mental, emotional, physical, material world, whatever they are. And then that way you can continue to come back to the service, which, like you said, we are a part of that. The self, and the self in all levels is a part of the all. And so you are
Mm-hmm.
still in service. It's not like you're completely abandoning like your own needs and everything. They're a part of it. But the more you bring your solidness to your ego self and all the levels of that, the less you have to worry about it, if that makes sense. The less
Yeah.
you have to be concerned with it as you're moving through.
Yeah. I'm such a nuance fanboy. I don't know why that term. I'm such a I'm such a fanboy of the nuance for real. Like anytime I hear something that has the flavor of possible polarity interpretation, I love,
Mm.
because
Mhm.
it's this embodied versus reading about. When you read about something, it's hard to understand the nuance, right? Like you're just kind of speaking some concepts. I'm like, I think I get this. And my felt experience going really deep in some of these things and these topics, it's like, wow,
Mhm.
I can't give anyone a panacea piece of advice. There's nothing. It's like moment by moment context. I need to be in the present moment with you and really feel it to even understand, like really solid advice. And I just love that we went there. And I love what you're talking about with solid. Like to me, I wrote down fortification. So you go through all of this process of unwinding all of the not self, coming into connection with yourself, your soul, even your ego and your inner child, and just understanding, what makes me me.
Mhm.
And from that place, you can't just stop. You have to
Mhm.
breathe life into it. And that fortifies the strength of it and allows you to become more solid in these truths. Otherwise, it's just another passing ayahuasca ceremony where you had like these big realizations of who you are and the all and everything. And then you go back to whatever it is you're doing and you haven't fortified your solidity in this new level of consciousness, this old and new level of self, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we come out of our darkest place. And that is the rebuilding process that happens. But every time we rebuild, we're building around something that's more meaningful and more important, and it's worth defending. It's worth fortifying. And so
Yeah.
all of these things in the material, our mind, we must fortify our mind, fortify our body, fortify the protections around the the vulnerabilities within us. and
Yes.
and they're not designed to be impenetrable, but we get to the point to we decide when they're permeable. We
Hmm.
decide when there's gets to be less fortification here or less solidness.
Mm. Yes, and that is the major topic of sovereignty, which I'll put a cap on.
Yeah, we
And
didn't get to go into that one so much.
but that's like the cliffhanger, the teaser to the next time we do this. I would love to deep dive into sovereignty with you.
Yeah.
And if you're open, maybe a good way we can start to land this plane is I know you've led workshops on this topic specifically. Is there one, some of your own felt sense of where you're at in your life in this process? Like, what are you fortifying your understanding of what's important to you right now as we, just cross the threshold of this solstice, of this very powerful moment in time, this ending, towards the end of the year of the snake and going towards the year of the fire horse. What is it for you that, um, yeah, that you're feeling the importance of?
I mean, similar to what we've been sharing on this whole episode, is just taking a moment. It's like what's important is continuing to stay tethered to what's important. And to me, the thread, the ether that connects us all, and I'm trying to think like a word that I want to use for it, but just like the service in all ways at all times with what I have and with what I am capable of. And so the word that comes to me is generosity. I'm at a place in my life where I have enormous gratitude, and it doesn't slip. I was going to say a minute. It slips a minute, but it doesn't slip a day. How fortunate and blessed that I truly am. And I believe that's a co-creation. I believe that's a dance of two, or a dance of us and creator. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. And the ability to be in a solid place and to give back and to serve is something I'm leaning more and more into. I say this very often, I have everything I could ever want. I have a family that loves me, that I provide for and protect. We have very clear, a very clear relationship with my wife. I have abundant and deep friendships. I have meaningful work, and very very soon we're going to be building our dream home, and here in Mexico. And so it's like, what else could this, like, the small self really want at this point? And so what's important to me is reciprocity. And I do it in my work, but my intention is also to do it more in the everyday moments and to serve where I can, when I can. And there's so many moments that um, I had something to give and I didn't necessarily, for whatever reason. And so that's one thing that I'm leaning into, just from the place I am in my life, where it there's just an embodied knowing that I have it all. And anytime there's like a want that comes in, it's like, fine, okay, great. See where that's coming from. But they get less and less and less, like there's less like stickiness to them these days for me. It's like, yeah, okay, great, let's do that. And then whatever. it's it's almost what it's like, okay, whatever, cool, back to it. Like cool, whatever, cool, back to it. No. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. Yeah. I love so much of the, like, the the other side of so much of your journey is this continued refinement of what it means to be of service, and the thread of devotion and the pulse of desire to service sounds like it's just pumping through you all day, every day. And so you're like, okay, how can I be more generative and show up more and give more? My cup is so full. And so that really highlights the very nature of our essence. It's like once, our survival needs are met and some of our, just desires are met, it's like it has a cap. And even people in those states, they'll be of service, but I imagine it just keeps deepening that desire, that well to just keep giving more and giving more
Mm,
and giving more.
mm,
And from like this desire I heard you name for reciprocity, that's so often my prayer, is like, I'm getting emotional now thinking about it, but just how much we've hurt ourselves and the earth and taken and drilled and extracted and raped, and this deep prayer for the reciprocity. Please show me how I can show up with clear granularity and detail, like the action steps that are that I personally can do the best, better than anybody, right? And I love this, like extending that out into the day to day, the moment to moment, like every interaction, not forget that prayer just because it's not some big service project, business, working with clients, whatever it is. Just because I'm not in nature and like trying to give tobacco and offerings in my hair and these things, like it's gotten to a place where that's very natural and easy for me. And I feel inspired by your share because it's drawing me into something deeper, which is a harder place for me, is just out in the world, day to day, moment by moment, each person, each bug, each breeze of wind can be an opportunity to slow down and listen. What is needed in this
mhm,
moment?
mm. Yeah, man, I really feel that, and for what it's worth, I had a moment with Mother Earth, and this was in ceremony, and because I've been feeling the weight of that as well, and my role in the rape and the pillage and the extraction of everything, and I was feeling my weight in this moment, and she kind of like a grandmother, very loving energy, just said something with complete unconditional love. She's like sweetie, like I'm gonna be okay. I know it feels like a lot, but like I'm gonna be okay. She's like, I'm actually worried about you. And the you that I felt was like all of us humans. And like I'm worried about you both. Yeah, yeah, physically you're ruining this paradise we live in, but also like that's the consciousness in you're living in, is this extraction, consumption, rape and pillage. And that's not good for you. I was like, that's not good for you, sweetie. She's like, I'm more worried about you. She's like, don't worry about me. Like, I was like, oh, I was like, even in this moment where I'm like, we've done so much to you. She's like, no, and I still love you. And like, take care of you, Q. Like, this is how you feel about yourself. So I just wanted to share that little nugget of wisdom that still, that was like 6 or 7 years ago, but it's still with me. And I don't know if it's true, but
Yeah, I've had those. Yeah, I mean, I've had those very similar moments connecting with the earth, and it's just like we might be in big trouble, and the earth will ultimately be fine. We cannot destroy her. Um, that is, I mean, as my belief,
that's
that's
my
the
belief
message
too.
I've been
Yeah.
given.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on that note, you know, deciphering and reflecting and metabolizing on what's important to you at a soul level, and just allowing that process to guide you deeper and deeper into yourself and helping you to remove what is not important, what may have been given to you or placed upon you without consent. And you may have just eaten it up and become indoctrinated into it. And you come to realize it's a mask, and it's a really old mask. And maybe it doesn't feel so good to be wearing the mask anymore.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah. Chris, wow. This is exactly what I expected. Just powerful, grounded, and expansive. It literally feels like this conversation was the essence of a tree. It's like deeply rooted, open branches and leaves, taking in all the energies of above and below, and just being in the heart space, which is the bridge of it all. And yeah, I just want to thank you so much for the work you've done with yourself. And thank you for showing up to this podcast. And I'm going to hand the mic over to you if you want to share about anything going on. You'll have links in the show notes, of course, but if there's anything at all that you want to add, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for having me on, man. It's felt like this whole conversation has been largely in the pocket, riding a beautiful wave here. So thank you for creating that space and dancing in it. And yeah, I mean, if people resonate with what I'm sharing and want to do work with me, the company and the movement is 13 Pines. That's the men's organization, and then 13pines.com, and then also Chris Marhefka on Instagram and chrismarhefka.com. I am admittedly, and I was going to share this before when we were talking about the service of self to others. I'm coming in out of a season of being a bit more reserved and not offering too much in the world into a season of offering much more. And I laugh at myself because it took me to come into touch with a small self desire, and that's that. I've been in this kind of travel mode really 4 years, largely nomadic, kind of out of Austin, and it's just been so strong for me to like have a home, especially now that we have a 2 year old and then another one on the way in June. It's just like a really like everything in me is like have a home and plant roots. And so yeah, this like selfish desire of like, oh, now I want to have a home and build this dream home is the catalyst for me serving more in the world. So I still laugh at how the
It's so
mechanics are still
nuanced,
working on
right?
me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing it, when I'm in the service, it's like, of course, like I would live every day like this. But also there's seasons, and I committed to being a very present father for the first 2 years, and that also meant I wasn't offering as much in the world. But that's shifting. So if people are interested in working with me in any way, please find me, look me up.
Amazing. Amazing. All right, dear listeners, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your presence. It's so valued, and wishing you a blessed rest of your day. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me on the Soul Body Wholeness podcast. If you like this episode, you can support the journey by rating and subscribing wherever you listen. I invite you to follow me on Instagram at soulbodywholeness for more insights and to stay up to date with my current offerings. And if you feel called to work with me directly, I invite you to visit my website at www.soulbodywholeness.life. I offer somatic alchemy sessions and soul purpose initiation journeys that awaken your inner healer, reconnect you to your innate wholeness, and ignite your soul's deepest purpose. I invite you to carry this resonance with you as you move throughout your day and return anytime you need a reminder of your courage, your wholeness, and your light. Blessings, old friend.